Oh, welcome back. Well, it's been a few weeks. Had a lot going on. Don't want to get into too much of it, but last week, the Seminole War Foundation, we had a very successful meeting up in Chattahoochee, Florida. And what I like to do is for those people who weren't there, I like to give the presentation that I showed. So those of you who missed out can see it here. So let's get started. And this talk is about Seminole War sites, first Seminole War sites around Chattahoochee, Florida, and Bainbridge that you can easily visit. Kind of little known sites, which are pretty fantastic. So let's get started with the photos here. Okay, so expand that. This is where we have our meeting. This is the Apalachicola Arsenal Museum. This was the Powder Magazine. It says erected in 1834. The state of Florida, actually all states and territories of the United States in the 1830s were to have an arsenal. The strength of the military in the United States was dependent on the state militia, the standing army of the United States. Before the Second Seminole War was only about 8,000 soldiers total for all the United States territories and states at the time. So that's going from Maine down to Florida over to the Louisiana Purchase, Louisiana, and unknown parts out west that they got from the Louisiana Purchase. So anyway, the brick building, the Arsenal Museum, it was reconstructed about around 2000. I think it opened in 2009. It's now a meeting and conference room, a beautiful location. The virtual background behind me is actually the bricks inside there. The bricks were made by Benjamin Chairs, and I think I'll do a video on his plantation ruins too. Um, and the first bricks that he delivered were of poor quality and failed, and he had to do it again. And the Apalachicola Arsenal magazine, the Arsenal was in use until the Civil War. The Confederates pretty much walked in and took it away from the caretaker. After the Civil War, it was the Freedmen's Bureau, and then it became the state hospital, I think, in the 1870s, where it has remained today. Now, to visit this site, you have to go on the property of the state hospital, and they'll give you directions at the front desk or at the front gate. It's open on, weekends. I think it was open Wednesday to Saturday, but anyway, they have a Facebook page, and let me see if I can put it in the notes down below for this video to give you all instructions because it's pretty much volunteer run and they have some great exhibits, some great events. One nice thing is that they have exhibits from the Smithsonian in the museum because security is actually very good. There, yeah, it's hard breaking into a museum that's originally a powder magazine, but the brickwork is beautiful inside and it has a conference room and as well, which I've held been there for several talks that I've given. Nearby, uh, the state hospital administration building, and you can't really go inside. It's still the hospital administration building. This is the original officers' quarters and administration building of the Apalachicola Arsenal on the grounds. So this working office built in the 1830s. So that's pretty cool. You can tell by the old style that it does go back that old. Here's the um, building. There's three buildings. The building next to it, which you can't really see because of the trees there. I think it was like the carriage house or the guard house, and historical marker in front of that. So it's pretty neat to have some remaining buildings from the 1830s. That's kind of rare in Florida. And nearby in Chattahoochee, going down to the Apalachicola River, is Chattahoochee Landing. This is Chattahoochee Landing on the Apalachicola River, not the Chattahoochee River. It sounds confusing. And so, anyway, uh, there's remnants of a mound complex, and there's some historical markers and interpretive signs. Uh, Ed, Edward Nichols had a fort that he established in 1814 to kind of get the Seminoles to rise up against the Americans. Uh, the war ended and he abandoned its area soon after. There's actually these two forts on the Apalachicola River here and what's called Prospect Bluff or Negro Fort, later Fort Gadsden downriver. A lot of people don't know that there was two forts that Nichols was using to basically do like a plan B if New Orleans didn't work to invade Georgia and Alabama or Mississippi territory through this area. Now, on the top of this mound here, this was originally a mound, part of seven different mounds in the area. Nichols built his fort, so this was actually a British fort on top. And after it became U.S. territory, they basically just filled everything in, dumped dirt on top, and had a tavern on top. And this was a major landing for, people crossing the river right here, because before, further up it splits into the Chattahoochee and Flint River, only about a mile up river. In fact, you can stand on the boat ramp and kind of see the dam from Lake Seminole that holds the reservoir there. There's several interpretive markers. This is one on the First Seminole War, and this is right here, or at the side of the mound. There's a marker missing on that, and that was about the shipwrecks in the area. That one keeps disappearing. Dale Cox did an excellent tour, and he knows about the missing marker, and that'll eventually get replaced. Nichols Outpost was here. This is the historical marker for that. This was a historical marker put up by West Gadsden Historical Society, Chattahoochee Main Street, and City of Chattahoochee. If you want to stop and pause the video and read the marker, go ahead, because it's pretty interesting. And of course, this was also the site of the Scott Massacre there on November 30th, 1817, more or less a retaliation for the Americans destroying Fowltown. Uh, Two Army transport barges were attacked, and uh, most of the people on it killed. There was about six soldiers who jumped out in the river, and although most of them were wounded, they survived and made it back to Fort Scott. And one woman survived. Her name was Elizabeth Stewart. I think I've done other videos about her. And nearby, a few miles north of here, is Camp Recovery. Camp Recovery was the hospital for Fort Scott. While all this was going on, the Scott Massacre in Fort Scott, it's a little confusing. The Scott Massacre is named after the officer in charge, Lieutenant Richard Scott. Fort Scott is named after General Winfield Scott. You have several Scotts running around. Camp Recovery was across the Flint River and higher ground, the hospital. They had a problem of, I think, yellow fever or going on at the fort, so they found a place that was a bit better, had airflow, not as swampy, and there's a historical marker. Behind that, that's private property, so you can see the gates here, more historical brick. Camp Recovery was the historical marker for this. You can just park here and you can kind of see the shadow of me taking a cell phone video for that. Kind of interesting about this is that there was an incident. You had Colonel Matthew Arbuckle commanding Fort Scott, and the surgeon at the time was Thomas Lawson. He later became the Surgeon General of the U.S. Army of the United States. And they actually got in a fist fight at Fort Scott. Um, Lawson was accusing Colonel Arbuckle of promoting prostitution, and Arbuckle said Lawson was trying to run the army, and they got a fist fight. Lawson was knocked out and put in the stockade. One thing you don't do at a frontier post is put the surgeon in the stockade. It's not very good. Um, Lawson demanded a court martial for Arbuckle, and it went on for a couple years. At the time, they were back out west. Thomas Lawson was actually from Louisiana, and Arbuckle was, I think, at Fort Smith now in Arkansas on the Mississippi River, I guess across from um, or wait. Anyway, Arkansas, across from what today is Oklahoma. There, um, I'm getting my directions confused, so that's the pause. But anyway, after a while, the Army decided that they couldn't determine what was going on and told them just to cut it out and forget about it. And so nothing really became of it, and both men, their careers went on and very successful careers after that. At Camp Recovery, and the encampment behind was where we had the 200th anniversary, the Scott Massacre, the Scott Battle. That's our reenactor encampment behind it. We had permission from the property owners. And this is the cemetery here, a little building here. I don't know if you'd call it a chapel or whatever for the cemetery. Here's the actual cemetery itself. None of the graves are marked. You can see like 40 depressions in the ground. And here's where we had a ceremony at the site on the anniversary of the Scott Battle, Scott Massacre. That's the 7th Infantry Regiment flags, because that's the regiment that was there. This is a 32 pounder encased in a block of granite there. We'll see that a couple more of those in a minute here. I'm showing this to you because you can't walk up to it. It's all private property. Now, nearby Camp Recovery, if you go to, was it Hutchinson's Ferry Landing or Hutchinson's Landing, used to be Jack Wingate's fish camp. There's a historical marker to Fort Scott. Because you can't actually get to the site. Uh, it's an island in the middle of the reservoir now. It used to be connected by land, but they got cut off, I think, when they built a canal or so here's a historical marker for Fort Scott. Zoom into it if you want to pause it and read it. Fort Scott Camp Recovery abandoned when Florida became U.S. territory in September 1821. This actually, on our anniversary event in 2017, going to the site of the Fort Scott, we kind of rowed a keelboat, and several of us took turns rowing it. And then we got to the actual site of Fort Scott. This is us, our group, having a kind of a memorial ceremony at the site of Fort Scott. Now, this was in cold weather time. During warm weather, timber rattlers are abundant, and copperheads. You kind of don't want to go there during the warm weather. But you could actually see the indentions of soldiers that were buried there. Uh, Gosh, must be about 90 burials or something, I think, from the records I've seen from Dale Cox, maybe as many as 200. It was very sickly post to be. And those soldiers were never moved. The Camp Recovery in Fort Scott, those are U.S. soldier burials that still remain there today. Going north on Faceville Highway is the historical marker for Foultown. Now, this was moved. The original place was along the roadside where it was not very noticeable. It's been cleaned up and repainted and actually put in a location where you can see it. Now, uh, you don't have to risk your life to see the marker now because it's easier to pull off. And I'll show you on the map in a minute. This is a historical marker for that. Um, on the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Foultown on November 21st, 2017, I actually visited the marker. It was in the old position and got a step ladder and a scrub brush and scrubbed off some of the lichen or algae that was encrusted on it. So I did my good deed for that. Now, if you go up to Bainbridge, there's Chasen Park. When the Americans finally destroyed Foultown and they took all the cattle that was around there and the grain that the Indians had stored, and they took it up to what's now Bainbridge in the north west corner of Bainbridge is Chasen Park, and that was the site of Camp Hughes or Fort Hughes. Fort Hughes in 1817. Uh, Built by the soldiers from Fort Scott and the state militia soldiers. And they took the cattle and I think most of the grain up to, um, was it Fort Gaines in Georgia? I think I got to have a slide for that in a minute. So this post here and this historical marker was actually the corner of the fort. They've actually found the wall of the fort from archaeological work in this area. I think it was like 140 feet square. Um, and they have a lot of great interpretive signs, like this one telling about the fort, Camp Recovery, Fort Scott, and uh, anyway, some of the other sites around here. And there's two more of these monuments of these 32-pound cannons in Georgia granite right here. Um, So I think this is the marker for Fort Hughes or Camp Hughes. And kind of interesting because the one American casualty at Foultown was the fifer or musician. His name was Hughes, and he climbed up on the roof of or the top of one of the huts in the village and got shot dead. And he was buried. They took his body and buried him. He's probably buried underneath where this cannon is. They haven't found his remains. He's buried in there somewhere. This is in the park. They have some giant oak trees there that were probably there during the battle. What happened is that the natives from the surrounding area, Foultown and Miccosukee Town, put the fort under siege for 2 weeks until soldiers came and relieved those in charge. Next to this is another cannon monument uh, in a granite block, and this is one for Fort Scott. This monument was at Fort Scott, which is now in the middle of Lake Seminole Reservoir. And since nobody can really easily get there nowadays, they took that and moved it to the park in Bainbridge here. Now, if you go north of uh, Bainbridge, I think it's about 45 minutes or an hour north. You come to Fort Gaines, and Fort Gaines is a town today by the name of Fort Gaines. So what it was is it used to be the last American settlement in Georgia, and south of there was Creek Indian land. That land was ceded to the United States, forced upon them in the Treaty of Fort Jackson in 1814. But there's a park in Fort Gaines, reconstructed blockhouse there, historical marker, and some other log cabins in the area. There's two houses in this area. Remember, I talked about Elizabeth Stewart. She separated from her husband's Lieutenant Stewart, and I think he later died, but in Oklahoma or Indian Territory. But she married a man named John Dill. And the legend was is that when she was captured by the Indians and held for several months, I think about 5 months until the United States soldiers, actually under Chief William McIntosh, Creek warriors, attacked the town of Econfina under Peter McQueen, and she was recaptured or you know uh, taken back by the Americans and William McIntosh's Creek Indians. And it said when she was prisoner of the Creek Indians that they only wanted coin money. They didn't care for dollars, that she had all the dollars on the ground from the people who died in the boat and stuck it in her dress and carried it with her. And when she was rescued, she had a fortune saved up. Not sure how much true that is because the native people were a lot smarter than you give them credit for. But John Dill and his former Mrs. Stewart, now Mrs. Dill, they became the richest people in Fort Gaines. Mr. Dill, he was colonel in charge of the militia, and uh, had two different houses that still stand today. One is the toll booth by the river, and then this one is private residence today. John and Mary Lou Missel, who wrote the book on Elizabeth Stewart, actually were guests and stayed in this house, which was pretty cool. So these are actually all historical sites within an hour drive of Chattahoochee, Florida. And one more, kind of north of there, is uh, not I don't not yet at Columbus, Georgia, but kind of south of there. If you go north from Lumpkin, Georgia, you get to a settlement known as Omaha, Georgia. And I think it's Highway 39. There's this marker. It's a granite marker erected by the Daughters of the American Revolution in 1936, the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Shepherd's Plantation during what we call the Second Creek War. Then this was June 9th, 1836. Georgia militia soldiers under Captain Garmany from Gwinnett County, Georgia, uh, went to Shepherd's Plantation. They were chasing after Creek Indians who were actually leading them into a trap and surrounded them and nearly wiped out the command. Could have wiped them out, but the soldiers uh, retreated or ran back. And, and anyway, it was kind of a major battle that not too many people know about. The Second Creek War in Georgia went very badly for the Georgia militia at the beginning, and so you don't hear much about that. There's scattered historical markers in southwest Georgia and southeast Alabama on the Second Creek War, which are really cool. Now, going east from here, if you go down Highway 90, highway known as the Old Spanish Trail, or Mahan Drive, east of Tallahassee, halfway between Tallahassee and Monticello, is Letchworth Mound, the biggest mound complex in Florida. Uh, so anyway, I wanted to point that out. That's actually one of my favorite mounds too, as well. I visit several times during the year. Not far from there, if you go up, there's like a county road or state highway that goes up to a settlement known as Miccosukee, and there's a historical marker for the village of Miccosukee. Um, and this was the kind of considered the origin of the Miccosukee Indians in Florida. And the Miccosukee village surrounded Lake Miccosukee. And so the village of Miccosukee was actually dozens of different smaller villages just for resources, and there's a large population. You kind of have to split everything up and spread them out, which is actually what happened. Interesting enough is that probably the population of Miccosukee probably outnumbered both St. Augustine and Pensacola at the time, uh, St. Augustine and Pensacola combined. So it was a major village. It included Uchee, Cheehaw, um, the Miccosukee, Hitchity, Seminole, and there's a archaeological investigation that happened this past year, and I went out there several times. I'm not going to give the location of that because it's all been covered up and buried over, and it's on private property. They actually found a burial on that of a significant uh, person, so it's now falls under NAGPRA, and the Miccosukee tribe has been brought out there and appraised of the situation. They're doing whatever they have to do for that. So it's being handled the way it legally should under federal law. Um, Now, what's neat about that in Miccosukee is just the historical significance of the things that were found out there really connect the ancient culture of the pre-Columbian, the mound builders, to the Miccosukee out there, the Aboriginal pottery, their flint knapping bottles, they have trade muskets, Chattahoochee brush pottery, the prettiest I've ever seen. I'm not really going to get into too much detail. I hope it's eventually published, but it's a very significant site, and I'm glad we know more because it gives significantly more knowledge into the site. Now, near the village of Miccosukee, if you go down that Miccosukee Road, or actually, this is the excavation pit at the site of the village, the archaeological work that was being done, all that black area, that's a fire heath, a cooking pit. Uh, One of the largest ones, or the largest one the archaeologist has ever found in any Seminole village, or Miccosukee or Seminole village. So it's a major find. Now, uh, what they found a lot of are beads, and this is me holding one of these seed beads. It's tiny. It's almost the size of grain of sand. It's really small. My friend Brian Cepeda beads with seed beads. I don't even know if he does ones these small, but anyway, check out his bags if you are a fan on Facebook. So it's amazing that these were found in abundance at the site. So it's definitely Indian village that had major trade going on. Oh, what happened? It skipped a slide. Okay, nearby that historical marker is this 1840s church. This is Indian Springs Baptist Church. This dates from the 1840s. And Indian Springs, where do you think it got the name? Well, it got the name from the big springs next to Miccosukee Village. That used to be the springs that fed the water for the village, major springs that have since been all filled in and no longer flowing. The church was moved about 3 miles to the west, so it's not at the original site, but there is a historical cemetery that actually connects the graves here to where we are doing the archaeological work that you saw on the previous slide here. Now, this next bill, this is in Tallahassee. I can't go without plugging in the Grove. The Grove is the mansion. Richard Keith Call was one of the officers under Andrew Jackson. Richard Keith Call was at the in the New Orleans campaign. Uh, Took part in the Battle of New Orleans on December 23rd, 1814. I don't know if he was still there on January 8th, 1815, on the conclusion of the concluding battle, where the British were pretty much wiped out um, and snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. Call settled in Florida and Tallahassee, became the territorial governor, had 2 terms as territorial governor, and he built this mansion in downtown Tallahassee that you can visit today. It's called the Grove. Call is buried behind it. His granddaughter, Mary Call Collins, married um, another governor from the 1950s and 60s, LeRoy Collins, who was one of the significant governors in modern history during the Civil Rights era. Um, so anyway, you can visit them. I'm actually a member, so I can't help without promoting that. So anyway, let me show you on a map where some of these places are. So let's go to Google Maps. Okay, here's Tallahassee. And if you go So, if you go west, if you go on I-10, I think it's like exit 166, or if you stay on Highway 90, that's kind of the actual route I drove there. You get to Chattahoochee, this is the Florida-Georgia border, and Alabama, so this is actually the tri-state area. Eastern time zone. On the east side of the river, the west side of the river is Central time zone. So Chattahoochee, Florida, and you get to there, zoom on this, is the state hospital. You have to go in the main gate and you'll have to go down the main street. Uh, at this intersection, take a right, take a left, and the Apalachicola Arsenal Museum right here. Interesting enough is that the uh, the pin here was originally at the wrong place, and I think our uh, museum actually corrected that recently when I pointed it out to them. So anyway, in Chattahoochee, there's a road that goes down to the landing next to Hardee's here. It's the River Landing Road, and you go down that road, and it ends in the Apalachicola River. Here is the original um, where that mound is and the historical markers. Chattahoochee Landing, Native American mounds. That's what I showed you on the picture and the different interpretive markers. There's a picnic shelter here, and there's interpretive sign that tells you where to find the different little interpretive panels that are in the area. This gray line here, that's the abandoned roadway. That was the Victory Bridge built in like 1922. It's a 100-year-old bridge. It's been abandoned now that the Highway 90 bridge has been built. Now, that's kind of significant. Now, if you go up a county road here, I think it's called Faceville Highway or Boulevard Street originally at the beginning, and it's not noticeable. In fact, if you go down here, it's kind of hard to tell if you're on the right road. Once you get into Georgia, it changes the name to Booster Club Road, and you'll go down there, take a lot of turns, go down, let's see, River Junction Landing, not quite there yet. I'm looking for camp recovery. Uh, looking for camp recovery. Okay. Booster Club Road is maybe 9 miles or so. It actually passes by the Camp Recovery Monument here that I just showed the slide of. And if you make a turn here on Recovery Road, Hutchinson's Ferry, that dead ends at the former Jack Wingate Seminole Lodge that Jack Wingate built, and the Fort Scott historical marker is there. Now, if you keep going down the Booster Club Road, Hutchinson Ferry Road, you'll get to an intersection and take the Faceville Highway. This goes up to Georgia, and there used to be a curve in the road. I think the old marker, old location of the marker used to be around here, but it's no longer at that location. The new location is on Green Shade Road. There's actually two historical markers there. There's I think a historical church or something. Anyway, it's right here on Green Shade Road, whereas the Foultown marker is. If you continue up the Faceville Highway, it will go into Bainbridge. Yeah, you're getting a grand tour here, going up the back route to Bainbridge, Old Quincy Road. So if you're in Bainbridge, yeah, I think it's right here, West Jackson Street. Yeah, here's Chasen Park right here, that little green area, Chasen Park. And that's the tab for that. See if that, well, they don't have I have better photos than what they show here. But anyway, they're developing that into major park for the area. So that's pretty cool. And then if and of course, if you continue up, I think it's where. So anyway, Fort Gaines, I think is maybe up. Anyway, okay. Well, a lot of important history that a lot of people don't know about now. Tallahassee and Monticello to the east. Here's the Selma and Miccosukee, where the historical marker is. Up here, Miccosukee Village. Here's the Indian Springs Baptist Church. And they don't have any good photos of it either. Uh, the Letchworth Mounds is on Sunray Ray Road, south of Highway 90. Right there, Letchworth Love Mounds Archaeological st Site. When I was last there, they had this little ramp or overlook closed off for repair. I think a tree went through it during a recent storm. So that's worth looking for. Of course, Lake Miccosukee has varying depths depending on the water level. And Monticello, that's actually went to Tupelo Cafe this morning there in Monticello. Hang out there, uh, have some coffee and some pastry or some quiche and all that. Great antique stores in Monticello. So that's your tour and history lesson for today. So that's kind of like the uh, talk I did at the Apalachicola Arsenal last weekend, but I actually gave you a more expanded talk because I didn't show them the map on where it's at. So back the last week, we actually had a tour of the landing and saw a lot of these sites. So now, if you want to take a tour, take a day off. I do these road trip staycations where I look for all the Second Creek War historical markers. That'd make an interesting video too. So I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll talk to you later.